Hi, and welcome back for week 2 of our digital learning. Today we're going to do a lesson on natural selection. It's probably going to be the longest lesson that I will teach you all year. So stick along with me with the video, but if I teach you this, hopefully it'll make a lot of sense. Okay, so you'll need your packet today, and we'll be open to page 22. If you don't have your packet, go ahead and pause the video and go ahead and grab it. All right, so something we use every single day is our cell phones. And we know that cell phones have changed from the time your parents were kids till now. So I want you to draw how the telephone has changed. Go ahead and pause me and just do a quick sketch. All right, so maybe you said that before the rotary phone, we had something that was attached to the wall. And then after the rotary phone came something with buttons. And then we had our first cell phone, which was also known as the brick. And then finally, we had these modern day cell phones and the iPhone. So we know that things have changed over time. As simple as it is to see that a cell phone has changed over time, it's also that simple to see that animals have changed over time. However, we have lots of picture evidence of the telephone changing over time. We don't have a lot of animal evidence because of pictures, but what we do have are fossils. We also have DNA evidence, and we have embryology, or how similar embryos are. So our essential question for today is, how does natural selection lead to differences in populations over time? So what we already know that Charles Darwin, he's pretty much the guy who came up with the idea of evolution and made it famous. He was born in England. He was famous for his work on evolution. He took that 5-year voyage on the Beagle, and he wrote a very controversial book called On the Origin of Species. We know through the bunny lab that we did that evolution is the change in allele frequencies in a population over time. So it's how a population changes over time due to usually a mutation. All right, and these mutations change the DNA and the genetic makeup. Now, Darwin knew this. Another man named William Wallace knew this. However, what some people were lacking was the mechanism. How did evolution occur? So what Darwin saw was that he observed these finches through the Galapagos Islands. There are 13 major islands, and he saw on each of these islands that the different finch beaks were a little different. And he said, well, this probably happened because of the food source that is available. So if there was some kind of food source which was harder, the beaks became a little bit larger and easier to crack nuts. Now that was his observation. And through these observations of the finches and a few other organisms that he saw, he came up with the idea of natural selection. Now, natural selection says it's the process in which organisms with more favorable traits live long enough to reproduce. So if you are an organism that has an advantage, you're going to live longer. You're going to pass those good genes on. So if you look here at Lamarck's giraffe example, he said the ones that have the taller necks are going to live longer because the food source is always higher. This short-necked giraffe, he's going to die quicker. He can't get enough food. So this tall giraffe will have more time to reproduce with mates and pass on these good genes. So evolution is the idea that organisms change over time. Natural selection is the mechanism for evolution. It says things change over time because the organisms with more favorable traits live longer. Now, is this just something that happens in ancient times? No. Natural selection is still occurring today. There's a sect of people called the Baja people, and they have been researched. They're also known as the sea nomads. All right, so imagine now I ask you to hold your breath. All right. How long do you think you could hold your breath for? Maybe a minute? 90 seconds. 2 minutes max. Well, guess what? The Baja people have been known to hold their breath for up to 13 minutes. They have an adaptation that allows them to hold their breath much longer than other people. So let's figure out why, because scientists have been studying them and looking at the idea of natural selection of them.
The Baja spend several minutes at a time underwater, and they've been observed to dive over 200 feet deep, wearing nothing but a weight belt and a set of goggles. But what's really remarkable is that they've been observed to spend about 60% of their working day underwater. And that doesn't really compare to any other humans, but actually the closest thing to that is sea otters. The Navajo had spleen sizes that were about 50% larger than their close genetic and geographic neighbors. I hadn't really heard much about the spleen. I know that you can live without a spleen, so it was kind of like, what is the spleen even doing? But it turns out some seals have disproportionately large spleens, and it's thought that this gives them the ability to dive for longer. If natural selection had acted in seals to give them larger spleens, then it might have done the same thing in humans. Your spleen stores oxygenated red blood cells, so by contracting, it gives you this boost of oxygenated blood. Evolution might not just be something that we see happening over millions of years, but rather over a scale like thousands of years. I dove with them. It was fantastic. There's nothing like seeing them in the water.
All right, so that's natural selection and evolution in action now today. All right, a few other examples of natural selection is bacteria. Bacteria becoming more resistant to our antibiotics. Drafts with longer necks live longer. A peacock that has a more colorful plume, they will get more mates and they will live longer and reproduce more, and that's how we got these beautiful peacocks now today. It happens in nature. Desert hares, the ones with longer ears, they're obviously going to live longer. They can hear their predators coming. Mice that can blend into with their surroundings. Obviously, a dark mouse on a light background will get eaten faster, and a light mouse on a dark background will get eaten faster. So, same thing with these things called peppered moths, and I won't talk about that too much longer because you're going to watch a video on it. So, natural selection seems like common sense to us. An organism that has better traits will live longer and be able to reproduce. All right, there are 4 principles behind natural selection: overpopulation, variation, adaptations, and then selection. So what you're going to do for the rest of this lesson, you're going to read the CK12 natural selection reading. I gave you a handout of that before we left for break, or if you click next, the next page, you can read that here on the computer. You're going to create the 4 principles of natural selection graphic organizer on page 24 in your notes. You're going to complete practice problems on page 25 and 26, and then finally here on Schoology, you're going to complete the assessment and let me know what you understand. Now, if you skip over taking these notes, you're only going to hurt yourself because we're going to do a big project on Darwin's frogs, and you have to understand these 4 principles to be able to do that well. So please make sure this is one class and one lesson. I really need you to take your time on. All right, natural selection. Show me that you understand it. Work through the problems. If you did the Darwin's Journey knowledge check number 2, you will see it's exactly the same. So copy and paste it from your drive, throw it into the assessment portion, the last tab, and you can submit it that way. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this lesson. I will talk to you later. Have a great day.